us, I noticed.
I did. Thank you. It's something I think about quite often, sadly. Good morning, Dr. Fuller.
Good morning. Good morning, Mr. Brown. How are you today?
Oh, fantastic. We were just chatting about all the work that went into today's show.
Yeah, a lot of it. And I think it seems fairly topical to me. It just seems of something that we might want to discuss at greater length, given the societal changes we're seeing globally, frankly.
Yeah, I entitled today's show, Milgram's Ordinary Men. As we'll see later, Stanley Milgram's work in obedience is something that everybody should study and understand that this is a human condition. This is not a Western nation problem. This is not an authoritarian problem. This is just part of the human condition. And as soon as you think, yeah, but I wouldn't fall for it.
Well, and that's, I think, why it needs to be discussed, just by way of inoculation. I mean, understand what you're walking into and what's out there and the potentialities that exist. And I think we'll discuss it at greater length later, but Milgram's biggest limitation was time.
Yeah.
He didn't have the time to indoctrinate people, and look at what ended up happening.
Yeah, so I think, I ask everybody that will watch or listen to today's show, abandon all moral superiority, those who enter here. You have none in this topic. If you're a human being, will watch or listen to today's show, abandon all moral. I like the sound of my own voice.
That was weird. Sorry about that.
No worries. Yeah, I mean, I think that as faster as you can remove your moral superiority from the topic, the better off you're going to be, because you don't have any. You're a human being. You're susceptible to these things. I love your point about this is inoculation, so that when it does happen, if and when it happens, you'll be like, oh, okay, I've heard this before. I don't want to be that guy.
Right. You just get off it's easier to get off the train if you know you're on the train, if you recognize what's going on. I think a lot of Milgram's subjects didn't know. They hadn't had the benefit of this kind of inoculation. And we talk a lot about stress inoculation with training, with the types of training you provide and I provide, where we try to help people get through these stressful situations by exposing them to lower levels of stressful situations prior to the fact. And I think an in-depth discussion of this topic about how ordinary people can come to find themselves perpetrating horrible crimes against humanity, I think functions as some of that inoculation. I hope it does, at least.
Yeah, that is definitely the intent. Good morning, Michael. Good to have you on, sir. Guile is also on. So enough footsie with the topic. As we said, today is Milgram's Ordinary Men, and it really kind of grew out of a book that you read and were sharing pieces of it with me, and that is Police Battalion 101. And there's a book, I think it's called Ordinary Men, isn't it? Yeah, there we go.
Called Ordinary Men. And it's, mine's all written up and dog-eared, and because it's a fascinating study. It really is. These were a reserve police battalion in the German army in the 1930s, late 30s, early 40s, and just from regular guys from Hamburg, right? I think your slides go into that.
Yeah, so and I like this picture to kind of set it up. Like it's Christmas time. We'll be celebrating the birth of our Savior here in a few days, and here they are as well. They've got the garland or what have you stapled onto the wall. They're enjoying beers and drinks and the camaraderie that comes with men uniformed in the professional arms. And
in 1940, let's not forget, Germany's riding high, right?
Oh, big time.
Everything's going their way at Christmas 1940. Now, I would argue by then the seeds are already sown for them losing the war, but that's a different discussion. But these guys are regular guys, they're doing their civic duty. And as you say, Germany's riding high. Life is good.
Yeah. And so to your point, the year before they had invaded Poland, and they're trying to establish order in this newly secured conquered, whatever you want to call it, territory, so that the German army can continue to advance. Well, you got to have somebody to stay behind order. I mean, we saw the same thing. I'm assuming, I know I did in Desert Storm. We need to keep moving. So we've just pushed the Iraqis surrendering to the rear, and there's some military police unit that's going to put concertina wire around them, search them, and all that kind of stuff. We don't have time. I think this is kind of the same thing, don't you? These are the middle-aged men that are making up the part that's going to maintain the order in that area, right?
Yes, these are, in most cases, not all, but most cases, some they're professional police officers, but a lot of them are older. They're in their 30s, which, as you know, for military, especially active service, infantry, combat kind of guy, that's ancient. That's an ancient guy. But these are adults, right? These aren't children. A lot of them are old enough to remember a time before the Nazis were in power. These are not people that came up in the Hitler Youth. These are not people that came up in that environment. So the glib answer, the easy answer of, well, they were just indoctrinated full-on Nazis, just doesn't apply to these guys. And this book goes deeply into motivations and even the officers. Very few of them were dyed-in-the-wool Nazis, adherents. Most of them were not. They talk about some of their professions. One guy owns a movie theater. Another guy is a lumberyard. Not a magnate, but he owns. He's well off enough that he's doing well, and he's just doing the National Guard kind of thing, the Reserve Police Battalion, to do his part.
I love that distinction. It's something that maybe at a casual glance of this doesn't pop out. Like, these were not, like you said, dyed-in-the-wool Nazis. These are people that knew, that went through the crash, Weimar Germany, they saw it all. And they're going to do their part, whether they were conscripted or what have you. But we're going to use this Reserve Police Battalion as kind of a foil to tell a larger story. And then we'll get into why I said abandon your moral superiority, because here in America, as you're going to see, we've done our own atrocities. But before we get into that, Dr. Fuller, can we welcome some folks on to the show?
I hope we can.
We got Troy on. Good morning, fellas. He is American Wear Society member 848 in Northeastern Indiana. Thank you for being on, Troy. And if you want to find out what becoming a coin member gets you, please click the links in today's show. We'd love to have you on board. Will is on. Says, good morning, Rich and Dr. Fuller, coin number 2269 from Missouri. Jim is on from Indiana. James is on up there. And good morning, James. He came to Warrior Camp. He's up in Mass behind enemy lines in the blue wastelands of Massachusetts. I hate to say that, but Mark is on from Ontario, Canada. Derek is on from North Carolina. My beautiful bride, Miss Lisa, is awake. Good to see you, Miss Lisa. Guile, of course, says Merry Christmas, Miss Lisa. Yeah, I think your point too about they're all coming mostly from Hamburg is also relevant, because these are people that obviously same ethnicity, same geography. They're going to maybe went to similar schools and what have you. They have shared community, right?
Yeah, absolutely. My own National Guard experience when I was in college and before I went on active duty, I was in Visalia, California, and 90% of the guys in that unit lived in the immediate community. I was one of the outliers. I lived all the way up in Fresno, which was, an hour's drive. Everybody else just lived right there in town. So they all knew each other. They all went to school together. They worked together. They went to the same restaurants. They lived in the same community. I'm sure that is exactly what you're seeing here. Now, Hamburg's a bigger city, pre-World War II. It was a flatter city post-World War II. But these guys, it's not difficult to envision that they're just a bunch of guys that know each other that are in the Guard together. That's exactly right.
And I'm going to keep showing you this picture, because every time you start thinking they're monsters, I'm going to show you this picture again and again and again. Cruz is on. Says, good morning, Merry Christmas, gentlemen. Coin number 1928 from Rhode Island. Tony is on. Says, good morning, folks. Good morning, Tony. So the first deployment really it evolved around evictions, resettlement, whatever you want to call it. And this would be in 1940. The battalion came involved really, I guess, for the first time in what you might call, war crimes, when they're doing their, institutionalized racial purity stuff. they're gonna have a couple of isolated incidents of shootings for people that are too old or too sick to travel. You can't resettle these people. Then maybe an NCO is going to come along and put them down.
Yeah, and one of the driving factors in here, besides the racial purity, was the Hitlerian concept of Lebensraum, living room. His big point to the Germans that he was coming up was, hey, we need room to grow, right?
Mhm.
We're the natural leaders. We need more people. Ladies, we need to have more kids. Gentlemen, we need to have more kids. But we need room for the German state to grow. Poland is right here. But only one problem is Poland's full of Poles. So we got to get them out of the way. And that's where some of this comes into. Because, the final solution hasn't been enacted in 42. I think
right.
A lot of people feel as though, the destruction of the Jews over the course of World War II took place over the entirety of World War II. And
No.
it simply didn't. Interestingly enough, by March of 42, only about 25% of the people who would ultimately be killed in the Holocaust were dead. 75% of them in March of 1942 were still alive. 11 months later, those numbers had reversed.
Isn't that, yeah.
So,
I think people forget the way it accelerated, you know?
Right. And I think a lot of people just don't know, right? We hear about
Yeah.
it as sort of a big monolith of the Holocaust, but getting into the particulars gets a little bit more sticky. And these guys, as you point out, Rich, are right there at the front end. They're not necessarily conducting massacres at this point and slaughtering people. But, hey, you got to leave. I don't want to leave. You got to leave. I don't want to leave. You're 90 years old. You can't get down the stairs. Pop. And then they move on, right? And guess what? Everybody else in the house is like, oh, hell, they're serious. They get out of the house. So these they did happen, the executions, and I don't want to make light of it, right? Every one of these is a horrible thing. But from the perspective of these guys is, oh, yeah, Sergeant so-and-so Sergeant Brown just smoked somebody over on 13th Street because she wouldn't move. I guess that's what we're doing. And the orders had gone out, but the order was primarily move these people, get them gone. But it's also conditioning these guys to forcibly evict people from their homes, get them out on the street, put them on buses or trucks or trains or whatever they're doing, just get them out of here, get them gone.
And I think another thing to remind people of, it's not really been talked about much, but you could certainly go read it for yourself. During Katrina, the people that couldn't leave nursing homes, guess what? Were found to have died of massive doses of morphine or massive doses of insulin or whatever. What are we going to do? I can't get them out of here. Are we going to just let them drown as the water rises? And again, the people that did that were healthcare providers that did probably the most humane thing they could do. And that's why I don't think any of them were prosecuted for what they did.
And how much reporting has been done on that, right?
Almost none.
Right. So
you have to search to find it. What does Michael Gentili say?
Well, with my ancient eyes, it says people don't often recognize the difference between northern and southern Germany. The South is mostly rural and are parodied as rednecks, and the northern Germans are wired a bit more tight, even for Germans, and consider themselves keepers of the true Germany, language and culture especially. I lived in Germany for 3 years, and there was a definite difference between northern and southern Germany, without a doubt.
Yeah, Michael was a CFO for a German manufacturing company, so he lived there for quite a while as well. So we got some isolated killings, and again, these are the men perpetrating it.
But they're getting conditioned, right? They're getting used to the idea of,
gradual.
We got to move these people out. And frankly, put yourself in that boat. All right. The law says they got to go. The authority figures say they got to go. Your job today is to move them. We're going into this town and we're going to move these 1,500 people out of here. I don't really like it, but is it in your head? Is that a war crime?
Not yet.
If you're not a sophisticated legal scholar on the topic, you're gonna be like, well, the boss says we got to do it. It's an order. It's not that bad. You shoved him around a little bit. We got him out the door, but yeah, okay. It's boiling frogs, right?
Yeah. Rasmic is on. Thank you to the 16 folks watching us live. Please like and hit that share button. I think, as you said at the beginning, Dr. Fuller, this is an incredibly important topic, especially as America is getting balkanized and very tribal. Human beings are tribal. Don't misunderstand me, but I think it's becoming accelerating, which speaks to also what we're seeing today, that it was very, very gradual. And I'm sure there was probably, hey, we can't get these people out. Get Sergeant Smith up here. He'll and him and his squad were probably the ones that the people at last resort when you can't move the old couple.
Sure. And or you're trying to move the old couple and Sergeant Smith walks in. What's going on? Why is this taking so long? What are you doing? Bang. Get these people out of here.
And you think that this wouldn't happen. I'm telling you, man, we're 2 or 3 days into the ground combat in Desert Storm, and our company gunny, I won't say his name, who's spent 2 or 3 tours in Vietnam, had gotten out. They worked at the post office and then came back in later. And now he's, in his mid 40s, got bullet hole scars all over him, and some of the toughest fighting in the Adrang Valley. And when we started taking prisoners in large numbers, he pulled his Beretta out. I was like, hey, we're not letting them slow us down. And the company commander was like, somebody get Gunny and get him the hell away from these people. He's going to start shooting them. Like, we ain't wait. We're not letting this trash slow the line down. Yeah. And that was his position.
And I get it, because we were rolling north and we'd run, they were surrendering how they were. You fly B-52s over me for 6 weeks, I'm surrendering to the first person I can find.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
You know how they were. They were surrendering like in droves. And we just didn't have the capacity to take them. So a lot of times we just grabbed their guns, if they even still had them, which they didn't. We'd throw them every pork MRE that we'd saved over the preceding weeks and say, point south, and we just roll. What are they going to do? I mean, I get it, because you don't want the enemy loose in your rear area. But these guys were broke.
Exactly.
Machine gunning wasn't the right response.
No. But I mean, that's how quick his mind went back to, hey, I ain't happening. And he would tell us some stuff they was doing in Vietnam, which was kind of like, but yeah. So again, these, here we are. Now we went from resettlement to, we got them settled. Now we're going to do some guard duty, but anybody that tries to leave the ghetto, deadly force is authorized, and they can and will be shot. So again, it speaks to the gradual nature. Now, of course, as this goes on, the longer it goes on, and you know this, Dr. Fuller, as well as anybody, the camaraderie amongst the unit, the us versus them, we're clean German officers trying to instill order and discipline, and this hungry rabble on the other side of the fence isn't like us.
True. But you also get used to each other, right? You're seeing the same people in the same places every day. This becomes a very human situation. These soldiers, these policemen, when they're off duty, I'm sure they're playing the German version of spades, right? Or dominoes. They're getting closer as a group, but they're also running into the same people on the other side of the wire constantly. And the people on the other side of the wire are getting used to them. So they're all those friction points are starting to rub off, and you're kind of like, look, you got to be here and do your thing. I got to be here and do my thing. Let's just get through it all as painlessly as possible. But so they're dealing with Jews in the ghettos at this point daily, and there's not mass killings, right? They're not smoking these people left, right, and center. They're getting along with them. They're like, moving along. Now, are they bludgeoning people? Are they kicking punch? I don't know. I would assume that in some cases they are, but it's not reported. So it's not systemic. It's not, going on all the time, because they don't want a riot. They want these people to just be in their little ghetto and do their thing. And that's the way this goes on for over a year. These guys are out there for what? They're until early 42.
Yeah. And then 42, you'll see the shift is pretty stark. I think that as you were saying that, Dr. Fuller, it reminded me of kind of the mentality I settled into working in corrections. And that was, we had a saying, the corrections officers among us would say, I'm doing 20 to life at 30%. and meaning, for those who don't most, if you get a 10-year sentence, you're probably going to do only 30% of that if you have good behavior. At least that's the way it was in Tennessee. So, and for those of us in corrections, we're like, hey, man, I'm going to be here till I retire. So I'm doing 20 years to the rest of my life at 30%, because I get out of here every day after an 8-hour shift, which is 30% of my day. So yeah, and I'm sure they probably kind of settled into the same thing. To your point, what's the difference? I'm on one side of the fence, they're on the other, but we're all kind of in this together. And I told the inmates that one time I had a issue where the pod kind of almost erupted, and I kind of set them down, and put on my Sergeant Brown hat, like, hey, look, guys, I'm doing 20 to life at 30%. Let's get along here, and find out like what's the problem.
I'm not trying to make your life more difficult. You're not just don't make my life more difficult.
And guess what it was, Doctor? It's like the juice machine. Right. I got the key to the juice machine. I can solve this problem, and the problem was solved, and it was kumbaya again. But you find those levers to pull when you're in close proximity to the people that you're responsible for, I guess.
And in this case, one of the levers they had, but that they weren't pulling, was shooting people in the face.
Right.
Now, I'm sure, the odd escapee and maybe somebody who assaults a police officer or something, that maybe that's happening, but you're not seeing the industrial level killing that you see later. These guys aren't doing that. They're not in any way, shape, or form at this point is it being reported that they are involved in anything approaching an atrocity at this time. And understand where this all comes from, folks. In 1962, they launched an investigation into this police battalion. The German government did, the post-war German government. And for a decade, they looked at these guys. Now, it was 17 years later. But they went back and looked at all the records and talked to a bunch of people, interviewed a bunch of people. So they're getting firsthand accounts from a lot of these guys. They're self-reported, but it's pretty solid information. And the Germans are a lot of things, and one of them is very good at record keeping. And so they have these records, and they just didn't show any sign of these guys being the people that they would eventually become.
Yeah. My brother, who also worked in corrections, he says, I'm looking through the same bars as you guys, is what he would tell them. And where Jeff was located, it was right downtown. So oddly enough, it had one of the most beautiful views of the downtown Knoxville skyline. And so it's like, whose idea was this to have them facing outboard to see the parties along the river and stuff? I don't know. Maybe that was the right thing to do, but
have you been to Alcatraz?
Oh, great point. Yeah, no, I have never been out there.
Fantastic views of the waterfront in San Francisco. Gorgeous. Now, you don't have them from every cell. Most cells don't. But you can hear them. You can hear on New Year's Eve parties, Christmas parties. You can hear them across the ocean. It's pretty close to the city.
Yeah. Ted is on from Central Mississippi. Rasmick is on. Old member in the house. Will Parker is on out there in beautiful Montana. Goss says, I can't see myself surviving in prison. Yeah, you have to become king rat. I mean, if you want to survive there. But now let's talk about how the mass murders kind of started. The first mass murder known to have been committed by the Police Battalion 101 was, quote, messy, according to one of the testimonies that you were talking about, Dr. Miller, for lack of training on how to do it. They said their uniforms were dripping wet with brain matter and blood. I mean, that's horrific to think about, but it was the murder of 1,500 Jews from a ghetto on the 13th of July, 1942, performed mostly by 3 platoons. 12 of the 5. Go ahead, sir.
I was going to say, when you talk about this, you hear these massacre numbers, 1,500 people. That's a big number, but you don't really put a lot of thought into the pragmatic issues at hand. And having been for a while a logistician in the Army, I'm thinking, okay, you got to transport these people to wherever it is you're going to the execution site. And that means you got to round them all up first, right? You got to get them all someplace, put them on trucks, drive them out. In this case, they drove them out into the forest. And there's no SOP for this, right? There's no standard procedure. These guys haven't done this before. They're learning as they go. They've been told you're going to take these people out. And they haven't really been given real specific instructions prior to. Yeah, it's interesting that they even the officers, the commanding officer doesn't show up. He gets all upset and he's crying and he's very, very distraught by all this, but he still gives the order and he sends his men out. And then they take these people out there. And the book was interesting because it goes very deep into how do you shoot a person and not get covered with gore?
Right.
With the rifles. How far do you put the gun away from them to do it? Where do you shoot them? What part of them do you shoot into? And then it gets really into what do you do with mothers and infants?
Yeah.
And that's just horrid. That's absolutely horrid. But that's what's going on here. This is their first time out the gate. Um, and it's a mess. It's an abs, as you would expect it to be.
Mm-hmm.
But what's really interesting, and you get into it here in a minute, is how many people refuse to carry out the orders.
Yeah, and as I read about this, it reminded me of that quote from Apocalypse Now. It's like these were just men. They had their hearts were filled with love. They had wives and girlfriends and children, and maybe even grandchildren back home that looked a lot like these children that they're shooting with their Mausers. I mean, this is horrifying stuff.
And in some cases, and I forget if it was this massacre or one of the later ones, they're running into people. Like one lady that they run into owned a movie theater that the guy who shot her used to go to.
Yeah.
They ran into a guy who was German and had an Iron Cross from World War I, but he'd moved out here to Poland, and he was a legitimate German war hero from the First World War. And they took him out in the woods and shot him. Mm. It's horrendous. But go ahead.
No, I was going to say, to your point earlier, I love the idea of discussing the logistics of this, because let's say you can put 50 packs per truck and you've only got 3 trucks. You can move 150 at a time to move them out to the forest and back. You got to make,
and you've got to guard them on the front end. You've got to guard them on the back end. Right?
And then you got to request the ammunition, receive the ammunition, and then they asked for and did get a generous supply of booze, right, so that these soldiers could be as drunk as a skunk, I'm sure, in order to do this horrific thing.
Yeah, and they talk about another unit that was brought in that helped them a lot and ended up doing a lot of the, quote, heavy lifting. And I forget where they were. I think they were Finns. Were they Finns? They were from somewhere else, and they would relentlessly show up completely in the bag.
Mm.
The Germans would certainly get blitzed after the fact, but a lot of them were getting, some liquid courage before they went into the woods. But they were getting a lot of booze, and the Nazi hierarchy recognized this as a necessity and supported it.
Well, it reminds me too of during the Chernobyl cleanup, all the dogs that had to be put down, and the units that were in charge of shooting these puppies and stuff like that. They were hammered when they got all the vodka they wanted. That was one of the perks of the job. But just to shoot dogs, imagine, and what's interesting, of the 500 people, there were 12 who opted out and later
500 in the battalion, and 12 said they wouldn't do it.
Yeah. And
what happened to those 12? In our heads, I think we all kind of default to, well, it's a Nazi regime. They were taken out and shot. Nope. Nothing happened to them. No coercive measures. They were given other jobs. They were allowed to maybe stand by the trucks and guard people as they got on and off the trucks, or they were back typing up requisition reports. They were pulled out completely. Nothing negative happened to them then or at any other time. Yep. None of them were punished. Matter of fact, the book goes into some detail about how nobody could find none of the historians that have studied this could find at any point that any of these people that refused, any of the Germans that refused to execute these orders and kill these people, were ever held accountable for it, for refusing a lawful order or any other number of things, which was mind-blowing to me, because I was like, well, of course they shot those guys. This is the Nazi regime. Did not happen.
No, I bet the in-group stigma that was attached to them was horrific, because I think they were removed or something like that and put into other duties. Obviously, they weren't killing duties, but maybe they're driving the truck or something like that, and everybody knew, this guy.
Right. And that, as it turns out, and we'll see it with Milgram as well, ends up being a significant motivator. Mm-hmm. And look, anybody who's been in a military unit especially knows how bad it can be when you get, put in the out group. It can be very, very difficult, especially, as you pointed out earlier, these guys are now really tight-knit. They've been working together a long time. And to be outed in that crowd because you refuse to do what's seen as a distasteful duty, or as I did it, but you didn't do it. Those pressures existed, and those pressures seem to have had a lot of influence on what happened and why these people did what they did.
I love the words you use. You said distasteful. You didn't say illegal.
No.
You didn't say immoral. No. You said just distasteful. I mean, because you're operating under legitimate authority that has told you this is this is what we're going to do. So the legality of it is somewhat assumed to be appropriate, and yet it was just distasteful.
And we've talked about it on the show many, many times about how nothing the Nazis did was illegal under German law. They were very, very meticulous about passing the laws that said, okay, this is okay. We will do these things. And this should be a concern for us today.
Yes.
Because it's easy for us to sit in moral judgment of these people 80 years ago, and probably appropriate. But as you pointed out, you can't then say, well, I would never happen to me. Well, what if you're in that situation where it is legal and it is a lawful order under that legality? Are you still going to refuse? Because now you're putting up your pension, you're putting up your, the health insurance, because you might lose your job. Now, is losing your job in the face of executing a mother and an infant, that scale is pretty obvious. But that's not the instant thought. There's an easing into this that people get to, and these guys are there. And as we see repeatedly in human behavior, they don't take the moral high road that we would all like to think we would take.
All right. No. Bruce is on, Michigan. Johnny King is on. Edmund Scarborough's on. So Johnny and Edmund are both in Kentucky. Good morning, guys. Thank you to the 20 folks watching us live. Kind of dark subject matter, but one that I think is incredibly relevant right now. And Dr. Fuller mentioned this yesterday, and I immediately was like, you're spot on, my friend. We've been talking for about 31 minutes, guys. This massacre went on for 17 hours. It took 17 hours for all 1,500 people to be shot one at a time. And to your point, like, where do you shoot them at? And, oh, by the way, they're not just going to stand there passively. They're going to beg for the lives of their children. They're going to beg for the lives of their wives, and you're going to look these people in the eye. I cannot imagine this. But remember, these were ordinary men. Now, we talked about the first set of killings that occurred in July of 1942. See, as you can see here, this is the murder operations of that Reserve Police Battalion 101. And you'll see that was just the start of things to come. They had three.
You make an interesting point there, Rich, about, you've got to walk these people in the woods, right? Yeah. And shockingly few of them ran for it. Mm-hmm. Very, very few of these victims took to their heels. And the ones that did, they shot at them, but they didn't necessarily chase them down. A lot of these victims.
Why do you suppose that is?
They're very passive about it. Well, I think they have guns. I don't. I think
normalcy bias, I think, number one.
There's a deference to authority in there.
Deference to authority, number two.
Yeah. And, they're just going to scare me. Maybe it's not going to actually happen. Maybe it's resignation. But you look at that and, in the vacuum that we're sitting in right now, we go, you fight, run, flee, attack.
They don't know what's coming. I mean, any more than
eventually they do, because they're getting into a wood line and they're hearing rifle shots out in the woods, right?
Yeah.
And they know that the trucks are coming back empty if they're coming in on a later truck. So they're figuring it out. But they, and if you're a mother with an infant, you're like, well, they're not going to do that to me. And I can't leave my child. I can't run away from these guys. They're bigger than me. They're faster. They're strong. Whatever your reasons are, these people went out there into the woods with this guy who maybe he's walked 6 or 7 people out into the woods already and shot him because he's covered in, as you point out, his boots are all gory and his uniform's a mess. Come with me. Come on. We're just going to walk out here in the woods. I mean, this entire thing, when you start really looking at it at a micro level, becomes just horrendous across the board. This is horrible for everybody involved.
Yeah.
And the Nazis realize this, by the way, and that's why you end up with the death camps and the mass gassing, because this is just too personnel intensive, and it's hard on people. Because look at these numbers that you put up on this slide.
Yeah. I mean, you think 1,500, my God, that's a lot. But then the next month, there's one day in August where they kill 12,000 people. I mean, just the next month. I mean, and these are, again, load your Mauser with 5 rounds, 10 rounds, whatever they take, and then one bolt action rifle shot at a time, I imagine. And maybe they had machine guns. I don't know. It's a little bit more down in the weeds than I think my brain can handle because it's so freaking horrific.
Yeah, a lot of them, according to this book, they figured out that putting a bayonet on the end of the gun gave you the right standoff, and they'd aim at the base of the skull and shoot people that way. And that that tended to lower the amount of mess and made it certain. And I'm like, but this is the experience they're getting, right? They're building that experience as they go along, and they're becoming inured to it. I mean, think about your own experience. First time you fired live artillery at a live target, I guarantee you remember that day right now. The seventh time, the eighth time, maybe not, right? Maybe not. Maybe you remember how fast you got the guns shooting, how fast you got on azimuth,
Well, for me, it was all radio, So again, as we'll learn later in Milgram, there's some, because there is, and I know Grossman talks about that in his book on killing. It's I make a radio call and then I watch the rounds go up, and
a lot of these guys they fall into that category when they're putting people on trains, which they do a lot of. You start looking at the raw numbers of who they killed in person versus how many people they packed into trains, and think about that. How much, you shot a bunch of people up close and personal, but now they just want you to get them from this town square to the train station and stuff them into train cars. You're like, that's easy. That's a breeze. No problem.
Thank God.
Yeah. But the end result's the same.
Yeah.
Right. If that doesn't happen, those people don't die.
Uh-huh.
So you're the proximate cause of their death. You
Yep.
got your fingerprints on that, but it's so much easier because there's that distance, right? There's that, it's just a radio call. I'm just calling radio. Or if you're the artillery guy, I'm just yanking a lanyard. I'm just stuffing things, right? I'm not, it's a little different when you're in the infantry.
Yeah,
just
very
saying.
much so. John Shriver is on Yukon, Oklahoma. Michael Gentili says, fear and control. How many times do a handful of people control hundreds and accept being murdered? Yeah. Don Bothwell is on. Good morning from Northwest Montana. Going back to just trying to put your mind in this and then we'll move on. But it's going back to the logistics thing. They're out there for 17 hours. So these men need to be fed. You got 500 people that need to be fed as they're doing this grotesque thing. And then when it's over, the weapons got to be cleaned. And it's just, when you start thinking about it, like, right. Oh my God, it's horrific. And as the numbers increase, the size and scope of it just gets mind-boggling. But
go back one slide real quick, Rich.
Of course.
Look at that bottom line.
Yeah.
From July to November. So we're talking about 15 months, 18 months, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
83,000 people. That's how many
about 500 men.
Yeah, that's how many they killed and loaded into death camps and shipped off. That's how 500 people, regular guys. And hey, look, we're not seeing a mass bunch of suicide after the fact either. These guys aren't so filled with guilt and remorse that they're offing themselves. As you point out, they go on to live normal lives. 83,000 people. I've lived in towns smaller than that. You live in a town smaller than that.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like you said, some of them did stand trial for war crimes, but the vast majority went on, and a lot of them kept their job as police officers, and they just lived normal lives.
When you say some, it's like 3.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's a ridiculously low number of people because there was diffuse responsibility and a lot of guys. Oh, this happened and that happened. I didn't do it, but some of them confessed. Yeah, I did these things. But the Germans were interested in moving on, and if you took everyone out who was a Nazi and threw them in prison, there wouldn't have been a whole lot of people to guard the prisons.
True.
So
now I wanted also, again, let's remove our moral superiority. The President Roosevelt, Executive Order 9066 in 1942, the same time that they're resettling and then later murdering the Poles, the Jewish Poles, we are resettling and relocating, is what we called it, the Japanese Americans. Some of these were second and third generation Japanese Americans, and we put them in concentration camps. Well over 150,000 people, and 1,500 of them died in those concentration camps. So I think, again, we walked up to the edge of this. Had they wanted to execute these people, they could not have stopped it. And I just, again, I want to be clear. Would the Americans have followed orders if they decided to execute these Japanese American citizens? We like to think they wouldn't, but history has shown us they probably would have.
Yeah, I mean, from a human perspective, we like to think that our veneer of American socialization would prevent that sort of behavior, but who's to say? Who's to say? And look, notice we didn't round up Germans. We didn't round up Italians. We rounded up the Japanese. There's a very racial component about the war in the Pacific. It's really hard to get away from that. So
going back to your part about logistics too, Dr. Fuller, a lot of these Japanese Americans were in Hawaii. So you've got to get them and their families and their businesses shut down, their houses boarded up, and ship them across contested waters of the Pacific to the United States, to a camp in Montana or wherever you're going to put these people, Wyoming. Jeez.
Yeah, it's a lot of effort. It's a lot of effort. And, I guess there's an argument to be made that it would have been less effort to just take them and throw them in a volcano or shoot them or what have you. So maybe that speaks at least partially better of us that we didn't do those things. But boy, we came awful close.
And that's my point. I mean, we were using the same euphemistic language like they did with resettlement. We call it evacuation and relocation centers. But it's creepy to me.
And it was legal, right? The Supreme Court reviewed it and said, yep, that's fine. You go right ahead.
Yep, that's right. Time of war, man. Special set of circumstances apply.
Right. So what's the difference between them and maybe somebody who votes the wrong way, or has the wrong, worships the wrong God? Very, very, very thin lines here.
100%. Yeah. So I'm going to get into the My Lai massacre because, again, we're not morally superior just because we're Americans.
Calling the balls and the strikes here on American Warrior Society.
There's nothing special about America. We've fallen into a civil war once before. We've wiped out the indigenous people that lived here. We interned the Japanese guys. We had slavery for hundreds of years. We're not morally superior to freaking anybody. We're human beings, and we're capable of the same atrocities as anybody else, as the My Lai massacre has shown us. Anywhere from 347 up to 504 civilians, mostly women, children, elderly people, were murdered by the men of Charlie Company and Bravo Company, which is part of Task Force Barker. Some women, sadly, were gang raped and their bodies mutilated. Some soldiers mutilated and raped children as young as 12 years old. So it is Will Parker says slaughtered 60 million bison. We're talking about human beings here, but I get your point. Yeah, we can kill when we need to. I also wanted to show this. This is a picture of the officers of this unit, right next to the officers from the 101st Reserve Battalion. Same set of men, right? Smiling, ordinary men, people like you might see on the street, people like you.
Yeah. Interestingly, Lieutenant Callie, who was in charge that day in my life, he was still around Fort Benning when I was going through training there. He was working in town there.
And a jewelry store, yeah.
Yeah, which I found odd. I'm like, if I were him, I would be as far away from any military installation as I could get. But that wasn't his experience, I guess.
I wanted to kind of take our lens and kind of really sharpen it in on just a couple of guys here that can give us a context here. Sergeant Kenneth Hodges, squad leader, was charged with rape and murder during the My Lai massacre. He said in justifying his actions, quote, "As a professional soldier, I had been taught to carry out the orders, and at no time did it ever cross my mind to disobey or to refuse to carry out an order that was issued by my superiors." And again, this falls right into Milgram, as you will see. This falls right into what we saw with the Nazis. He again says his soldiers were trained that way. Quote, "It's either you or the enemy, and the people who were in that village, the women, the little kids, the old men, were all considered the enemy," end quote.
And see, I will buy that. That's what he believed up to the point of murdering prisoners. I refuse to buy that as a justification for rape. Because look, I've served in 2 combat zones. You served in combat zone. Been in combat, shot at people, had them shoot at me. At no point did I think, hey, we got this guy. Let's gang rape him.
I know.
That just never crossed my mind. So for him to use, well, I was ordered and I was trained and my soldiers, they were the enemy. I get all of that. But that doesn't dismiss your culpability for rape. It just doesn't. And for you to argue otherwise is disingenuous at best.
He was not convicted, by the way, but he was dismissed from the Army.
Yeah.
And he went on to live an ordinary life. There's a picture of him as a paramedic and a fireman. Just a model American. Never got in trouble again. Never did anything wrong. My thing is set the rape aside, because that's, you deserve to go to prison for as long as they can house your ass. But the idea of this is a 12-year-old girl, doesn't have a weapon. She's got her hands up. That's not an enemy combatant anymore. What are we doing here? That's not somebody we shoot anywhere. You know what I mean? So if that person was an enemy, the minute they drop their weapon and raise their hands or prone down on the ground, not justified.
I do have to recognize the fact that you and I are beneficiaries of this, right? Our military training was different from his. I don't know that he ever had a military ethics class. I don't know that he ever had a law of land warfare class, but I know I did. And I feel certain you did as well.
Absolutely.
And you get it beaten in your head from the time you enlist to the time you get out. You don't do certain things to prisoners. It just doesn't happen. I mean, getting infantry guys, when you pop an ambush, to shoot people as they're running across the objective, set up a perimeter on the far side of the objective, and then come back in to search people and not shoot them at that point, that's a hard sell.
Yeah.
But we sell it, right? That's what we train. I'm sure the infantry training in the Marine Corps is the exact same thing.
Absolutely.
When we're moving through an objective, if it twitches, it gets shot.
Mm-hmm.
When you've set up a far side perimeter and you're coming back in looking for documents and prisoners, you're not shooting them out. You're treating them.
Yeah. They had a problem with, I don't know if you know this or not, I just recently found this out. There were so many Islamists that were headshot after they were moving through Fallujah. The Marines are like, they thought war crimes had been committed. There was an investigation, and it was determined that really it was the use of the ACOG for the first time in a urban setting like that really turned the tide.
An entire generation that had grown up on video games.
Yeah, man. And they were dome shooting people like it was cool. Pop your head up, pow. And that was, it made a difference.
Shooters, even if you look at school shooters, those kids with the only training they typically have is video games. They are very, very high percentage head shooters. It's a vast change from World War II.
100%. This is another one I want to just kind of drill down here. Thank you to the 18 folks still with us this morning. This was some quotes here from Bernardo Simpson. He said, "This woman looked like she was running away from the hedge line with a weapon. She was carrying something. I was given an order to shoot. I told the officer, which is Callie that you just mentioned, Dr. Fuller. He said, I was told the officer, you shoot. I didn't want to kill a woman. He gave me a direct order, so I shot her. There was a little baby with her that I had also killed. I turned her over, and there was the baby's face, all gone, half gone, I'm sorry. My mind just went. Then I started killing old men, women, children, water buffaloes, everything. We were told to leave nothing standing. I killed another 20 to 25, cut their throats, cut off their hands, cut out their tongues, their hair, scalped them. I did it. A lot of people were doing it. So I just followed suit. It just came. I didn't know I had it in me. I don't think beforehand anyone thought that we would kill so many people. I mean, we're talking 400 to 500 people. It's just like the gas chambers, what Hitler did. I lined up 50 people, women, old men, children, everybody, and just mowed them down. I have nightmares about the children. And Simpson went on to took his own life in his home, shot himself in the head May the 4th, 1997, at the age of 48. This is an example of, and what's interesting, I drilled down on this young man, Bernardo Simpson, a little bit more. He was going to the University of Tennessee in Knoxville. He was in his second or third year. So this is an intelligent young man from Mississippi. He joined the Army because to quote him, he said, just to get it over with. I knew they were probably going to get me in the draft. So he went ahead and went in. So this is someone that has a little bit more intellect than your average one of McNamara's millions, when he was just cleaning up any kid that could push down hard enough to make 3 copies on the carbon paper. So I think if he's susceptible to it, and initially he said no, and Callie said, yeah, you're going to do it. And he did it. Once he started, he couldn't believe what he was capable of.
Which falls right into Milgram, right?
Yes.
Milgram gives us a peek into that. And it should be, a cautionary tale for everyone, because it's very easy, again, as we sit here in our warm, cozy homes, to say, well, that's terrible, would never do it. But unless you've been in that environment, it's hard to say with certainty that you won't do it. It's a very, very dehumanizing experience being in infantry combat. It really is. And these guys, just like the police battalion guys, it wasn't their first day in Vietnam that this happened, right? They'd been there a while. They had other things happen. They started to become desensitized, and then pop. So it can happen to anybody. As you point out, this is an intelligent, educated guy. And by all appearances, it destroyed his life. Really did.
And I encourage anybody that's not that familiar with My Lai massacre to look into it. And Warrant Officer Hugh Thompson and the two men who were with him in his helo that day deserve every bit of accolade they can get. They were all awarded years and years and years later the Soldier's Medal, which is what Dr. Fuller was awarded for bravery and what is the actual?
Yeah, I've always found it interesting that they got a Soldier's Medal and not something different, because the Soldier's Medal is it's the highest peacetime or non-combat award for heroism.
Right.
And I'm like, well, that doesn't count as combat. I guess what does? I guess they weren't being actively shot at by other Americans. I guess I don't know, but nonetheless, they were recognized for it, and that says something.
And one of the young men, I think he was 20 years old. I forget his name, Agrado or something. It's a Italian name, but he was killed 2 weeks later, 20 years old. But remember Warrant Officer Thompson, he runs out. He's trying to tell Callie, hey, what are you doing? You can't. And Callie's like, hey, pal, pound sand. This is not your thing. And then finally, Callie kind of warns him, like, hey, you better go back on that helo, mind your own freaking business. And so Warrant Officer Thompson, the helo pilot who landed, again, he wasn't supposed to land. He wasn't probably authorized to land, but he did it, right? And he's like, hey, if they start shooting those people in the ditch, light them up, kill them. And talking about shooting the American troops. And of course, at the time, his career was in jeopardy until the news broke. And then it was like, oh, he did the right thing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we love you. Like, no, in the time, it was not. So it's a great case study. And I think Thompson did lecture at West Point many times about character under fire and things of this nature, ethics and warfare, et cetera.
Yeah. We always talk about the hard right over the easier wrong. It's a great, mental exercise, but that is it in action. How do you do that?
Tony says, and how do you think U.S. military 18 to 21-year-olds would react to orders against fellow Americans today in case of escalated civil unrest? Remember, Biden said if they had F-16s and nukes. Yeah. Well, if Milgram, which we're going to get into next, is any kind of barometer for these things, I would imagine that they would follow orders.
And that's why we're having this conversation.
That's why we're having this conversation, to inoculate us against it. So I won't go down. I don't want to go too far in the weeds. It's interesting the way he did it, but I think I'm going to skip ahead here because I think the background to why Milgram decided to do this. Yeah, here we go. He intended to compare levels of obedience in the United States with those in Germany, given the aftermath of the Nazi atrocities. Like
I'm sure. Americans would never do that sort of thing. It's those crazy Germans.
That's exactly right. That's precisely the position. He could not believe that it would happen here. And to his surprise, and many people that he told that he was going to do this, the U.S. results were so unexpectedly high that they abandoned the cross-cultural comparison between the U.S. and Germany. So I think the big takeaway from these things were this is a human vulnerability to authority pressures. I mean, let me say that again, universal human vulnerability.
And to his credit, he still published, right? This didn't come out the way he thought it was going to. It didn't, it ran counter to his hypothesis, but he still published. And thank God he did.
Thank God.
Because just because it didn't come out the way you want it to, we still need this to be out there to remind people that, hey, it's not, it's just the Germans that can do it. Oh, it's just the Japanese that can do it. No, it's not.
Yeah, so let's take a look kind of how they set this up. So they put an ad in the paper in right outside of Yale University and said, "Hey, we'll pay you $4.25 just for showing up, even if you decide not to participate. But we're looking for test subjects." So in the lobby, there's two men that show up for this. But what you don't realize is one of them is an actor named Mr. Wallace. It's not his real name, but that's what he went by. And he would chat up the guy. "Oh, so you're here for the study too. This is cool. All right, nice to meet you. Yeah, I've kind of got an appointment later in the day, and I've been having this. I think I got to go to a doctor. I've been having a heart problem and all this kind of stuff." So he has a little script he's got to tell the guy who's sitting next to him. And then this man in a lab coat comes out and says, "Oh, gentlemen, come on in. We're gonna draw numbers for who's going to be the teacher and who's going to be the learner." Well, it was rigged. And Mr. Wallace was always the learner. And the teacher was always the poor, innocent guy off the street who didn't know. So they would take this, and if you're watching in the regular show, you'll see there's actually one of the subjects, and I'll show you a video about it here in a second. There's a little 2-minute video I'm going to show. But he helps wire the guy to the machine in the other room. And then he gets a test shock, I think 45 volts, just ow. Okay, so he's led to believe this is real. He helps buckle the guy in, and then he goes out of the room to ask questions. And if the guy gets it wrong, he gives him a little zap. Well, first it's nothing, and Mr. Wallace kind of giggles on the other side, and they keep asking questions, and they keep zapping, and the more he gets wrong, the more volts he gets. And anything else to add before I show this video, Dr. Phillip?
No. I mean, this is a pretty famous experiment, and I think most people are probably relatively familiar with it.
I hope they are, but I have a sick suspicion that they're not.
Yeah, well, they might. And you know what? Hey, even if there's only one person that's not familiar with it, it's important to get this information out.
In order to understand how people were induced to obey unjust regimes and participate in atrocities such as the Holocaust, he set up an experiment. Volunteers were told they were taking part in scientific research to improve memory.
Would you open those and tell me which of you is which, please? Teacher. Where? Teacher.
Separated by a screen, the teacher would ask the learner questions in a word game and administer an electric shock when the answer was incorrect. He was told to increase the voltage with each wrong answer.
Cloud. Horse. Rock. House. Answer. Wrong. 150 volts. Answer. Horse.
Experiment. That's all. Get me out of here. Get me out of here, please.
Continue, please. Go right on.
I refuse to go on. Let me out.
The experiment requires you continue, teacher. Please continue.
Participants didn't know that the learner was really an actor and the so-called shocks harmless.
You're going to get a shock. 180 volts.
I can't stand the pain. Let me out of
You
here.
can't stand it. I'm not going to kill that man, eh? I mean, who's going to take the responsibility if anything happens to that gentleman? I'm responsible for anything that happens here. Continue, please. All right, next one. Slow. Walk, dance, truck, music. And
2/3 of volunteers were prepared to administer a potentially fatal electric shock when encouraged to do so by what they perceived as a legitimate authority figure. In this case, a man in a white coat.
375 volts. I think something's happened to that fellow in there. I don't get no answer. He was hollering for less voltage. Can't you check in and see if he's all right, please?
Milgram's findings horrified America. They showed that decent American citizens were as capable of committing acts against their conscience as the Germans had been under the Nazis.
Yeah. So it's a sad fact, but they did. 65% would shock someone all the way to death. Now, what's interesting about this is eventually the gentleman who's saying, "I have a heart condition." And remember when they were in the lobby, Mr. Wallace, the actor, said, I got a doctor's appointment later. I've been having this chest pain. So now he starts saying, "Hey, I've got this heart condition." Remember, and he's tied down to the machine. He can't get out. He eventually, I think at 300 volts, he goes silent, stops screaming and begging to be let out. And yet they continue because the man in the lab coat says no answer will be viewed as a incorrect answer. So you will administer the voltage.
And this guy that they showed in the video right now is clearly concerned, and yet keeps giving him the shot.
Yeah.
Keeps on shocking, even though he's worried. I'm not going to kill that man in there. Zap. It doesn't speak well for us as a species.
No. And see, Tony says, and Tony's a very learned man. He says, wow, I hadn't seen this study before. And that's why we're discussing it.
Exactly.
Don has a wonderful point here, Dr. Fuller. He says, I took my Psych 101 class with an E7 that was there as a FIST fire support, I believe. Sergeant, when My Lai was brought up as part of our conversation during the lecture, the guy blew up at the whole class, quote, you weren't there. You don't know what we went through. So all you can shut the fuck up, end quote. The class ended early that day. And that's another thing. Cali, if you look at their mindset, he had lost a lot of his platoon a day or two before in a minefield. And this was like payback. Yep. And they didn't even call it the My Lai. I think it was called Pinkville on the map. And that's what they was for them. They were attacking Pinkville, which is responsible for laying the mines that killed their buddies. So again, to the mindset.
Right. And of course, it's like anything else. You know, we blame the group. You know, did the people that laid the minefield come from My Lai? Maybe.
Yeah.
Did the 12-year-old girl go out there and lay the minefield? I don't know. And if she did she deserve to be gang raped and butchered?
Scalped?
Yeah. You know, my argument would be no, but you know, I wasn't there. So sample size, demographics, et cetera. You know, the sample size included occupations from postal clerks to high school teachers, salesmen, engineers, laborers. Some of them had doctoral degrees. So, you know, everything in Ordinary
between.
men.
Ordinary men. We talked about the procedure, the learning task. We talked about that briefly.
Look at the amount of indoctrination these people received. Almost none. Right? I mean, they're coming off the street. As far as they're concerned, they're randomly selected to be a teacher. And bang, they're in there doing it. Now, take that same person and give them 15 years of Nazi societal indoctrination. You are the master race. You deserve Lebensraum. These Jews are the reason that you don't have food. You know, they're the Antichrist. You know. Yeah,
they killed the Christ.
Now where are you? After 15 years of that, if an ordinary man can come in off the street and do this to somebody, is what the police battalion did? All that. I mean, it's shocking to the moral sensibilities, but is it surprising?
No. And so this is the machine that they were using. Of course, it's fake, but they didn't know that. And it even had a little light that was showing that it was recharging. And okay, now you can administer the shock. And it even says along the bottom that it's going from mildly irritating to severely deadly. And then the last two buttons have 3 X's on them, implying that they're lethal. So at 75 volts, the learner admitted the first auto. This is the way it was set up. Mr. Wallace was told when you see on your panel that he just gave you the 75 volts, then you're supposed to, you know, make a grunt in pain. When you see that you've been administered 120, you start protesting. Okay. At 150, you begin to complain specifically about your heart condition. Around 300 volts, pound on the wall, indicating significant distress, and then stop giving verbal response. And after 330, the learner becomes completely silent, creating the impression that he's either unconscious or unresponsive. Now, what's interesting here, Dr. Fuller, in order to maintain consistent between one test subject and the next, they could only use these prompts. And the first prompt you gave was, please continue. Please go on. Prod number 2, the experiment requires you to continue. Third prompt, it is absolutely essential that you continue. Number 4, you have no other choice but to continue. And what they found was people didn't like prod number 4, you have no other choice. They were much more successful using the benign, the experiment requires that you continue.
Oh, I guess at the point where you're telling you have no other choice, perhaps it throws a switch in the head and goes, no, wait, I do have a choice.
Exactly.
I do have a choice. But of course,
does the mentality change when looking into religious persecution and those willingness to take the same actions? So I think it speaks to what you said, Dr. Fuller. You've been indoctrinated for your life.
Yeah, I would imagine it's just a matter of what you've been indoctrinated into. And, look throughout history, pick a time, tell me indoctrination doesn't work. Ask the Crusaders, or the Fourth Crusade, right? I mean, ask human wave attacks by the Chinese in Korea. I mean, ask a Marine who hit a beach at Tarawa.
Exactly.
Okay, tell me that indoctrination doesn't work. You were a Marine.
100%. It works. I mean, we have our recruit training, 13 weeks, man. It's the best brainwashing the world has ever seen, as far as I'm concerned.
And it's effective. I mean, we joke. I always joke. You can always tell a Marine by the EGA stickers on his car. But it's a lifelong, right? You're a member of a brotherhood. You're an elite. You're a special person. Well, you've got to tell people that if you're going to say, look, I want you to get in this leaky boat with 20 or 30 of your closest friends, and you're going to head towards that beach that's a mile away, and there's a bunch of really, really brave guys there who are equally indoctrinated to kill you, and they're going to try their level best to do that, but we want you to go over there and kill them. And they've got machine guns and flamethrowers and grenades and mortars and snipers, but go in there and do it. Well, a guy like you and me be like, no. 18-year-old that's been successfully indoctrinated, different story.
I remember my company commander, his father was a retired master gunnery sergeant, fought in World War II. And I remember we were talking about after the war, he had been an enlisted Marine, and now he was a captain. So I think he got 18 years in at the time of the Gulf War. And he goes, I remember my dad asking me when I got back from Desert Storm, he says, how many guys' asses you had to whip to get them in those Amtraks? He's like, none. He's like, really? Evidently in World War II, he said there was some guys that they were draftees, man. We were an all-volunteer Army. Every one of us was a professional. Every one of us signed a contract. We wanted to be there, and we gleefully loaded on those Amtraks. But he said, during World War II, man, there was some people that did not want to climb down that cargo net, man.
But you'd also been through the indoctrination. So,
yes.
You were a different animal to start with. And then the Marine Corps indoctrination has gotten nothing but better in the previous 80 years, or in the case of the Gulf War, 50 years.
Yeah.
It just has, just like marksmanship has, just like our vehicles had, just like our weapons had, just like our ammunition had. The ability to talk to people and indoctrinate them to do these things has gotten better. And it works. And that's the thing we got to watch out for is, what have you been indoctrinated to now? And what's the media indoctrinating you towards today? And don't think it won't work on you folks, because it absolutely does. It works on all of us.
And I'm hoping that a show like this will give people some intellectual and moral, ethical pause if and when these things kind of raise to the level of awareness. Because when I was a young man, could I have participated in something like My Lai? I like to believe there's no frickin' way Southern Baptist 19-year-old Rich Brown would have done anything close to that. But I wasn't there. I know I can tell you with absolute certainty that at 56 years old, it's completely out of the question. You know what I'm saying? Absolutely not, because I've got a lot of life experience. I've read a lot of books on philosophy. I'm educated. I understand how these things happen. But as a young teenager, I think I would be arrogant to say it would not have happened.
But, look at the responses that we're seeing on both sides of the political aisle now to, almost xenophobic responses to certain countries overseas. Look at our individual responses to the wave of Islam hitting the Western nations. Look at our responses now to immigration into this country. Regardless of your political affiliation, whether you're for it or against it, of any of these things, how did you come to be that way? How did you come to make those decisions? And I would postulate that a big part of it was indoctrination. People talking, people convincing you to be this way.
Okay, I'm gonna push back a little bit on there in order to maintain calling balls and strikes. So there was another study that was done, and again, you can't do this now. I think this is in the 30s. They wanted to see if you could induce a phobia. So what they would do is, anytime the kids saw and these were babies, infants, but anytime they saw a dog, a picture of a dog, anything, they would ring a really loud bell and scare the crap out of the baby. And then eventually the baby's terrified of not just a dog.
Who comes up with this crap? Even 100 years ago. I mean, come on.
Sick people. But the point was, then it kind of, as the phobia took on a life of its own, anything fuzzy, anything furry was terrifying. And I say that because phobias are often earned. You know what I'm saying? If you, every time you try to swallow a strawberry, you choke on it, you choke on it, you choke. You're not going to eat a damn strawberry anymore. I promise you that. Anytime, you turn on the news and you see a certain demographic. Yeah. Tony's talking about Pavlov's dog. Yeah. Where the dog hears a ringing bell and he starts slobbering. We're talking about obviously human children, but we're an animal, no different, right? But my point is, a lot of these phobias are well earned. And I'm speaking to the people in Milan, or speaking to the people that are labeled as Islamophobic by the West. It's like, well, okay.
And I think it's important for purposes of this discussion, especially, to point out the difference between learned behavior and a phobic scale reaction. Phobia is a diagnosable psychological, reaction, disorder, is a way of putting it a lot of times. Learned behavior is another story entirely, and it's a lower threshold. So, and we had this conversation about the overuse of the phrase Islamophobia. I don't feel like I have Islamophobia because I don't like Islamic extremists that try to blow me up or kill me. That's just learned behavior. That's experience.
There you go. Thank you.
That's
experiential learning. Yeah.
Right. That's what that is. That's not a phobic scale reaction.
No.
You see people with arachnophobia, they climb the walls trying to get away from the tiniest little spider, as opposed to most of us that are just like, yeah, get that thing off me. Right. I don't like these things. I don't like being startled by them. I got bit by a brown recluse once, and that's all I want to do. I don't ever want spiders, but it's not a phobic scale reaction.
Right.
But my point remains, however you feel about these hot button issues, put some intellectual thought, some intelligent thought into where your position comes from and why you feel the way you feel. Don't simply be a puppet of somebody out there that's pulling strings on you and is indoctrinating you into a way of thinking that they benefit from.
Yeah. So back to Milgram real quick. I absolutely agree with you. The learned behaviors. I don't have Islamophobia because they're building a mosque down the road. It's giving me the willies. I have a problem with it because mostly my entire adult life, they've been killing, Christians and other people around the world at a scale that's unprecedented. 64,000 Islamic terror incidences and counting, with leaving 250,000 people dead in 170 countries. That's not an irrational phobia, folks. That's learned behavior, right?
And I could ask you, name 5 terrorist events in the last 25 years, and now and I'm sure you could do it. But if I say to you, name 5 terrorist events in the last 25 years that were committed by non-Muslims,
the Amish.
Now I've got you, because you might be able to do it because you're an intelligent guy and you spend a lot of time studying this, but you'd be one of the very few.
I don't think I could pass that one. Honestly, I can't think of anything.
It's tough. It's
more tigers, but are they Muslim?
Tamil? I don't know if they are. Yeah, but I mean, we haven't heard from them in a couple decades.
They've been quiet.
So why is it surprising that some of us are starting to go, hey, 2 + 2, what's that equal?
The poisoned M&Ms that we talk about a lot on this show.
Talk about them all the time.
So here's the results. Milgram, so he tells all these psychiatrists he's about to do this study, and they predicted that only 0.1% not 0.1 of them, but 0.1 participants would administer the maximum shocks,
which echoes his hypothesis going into this.
Bingo. So that it's just not going to happen. Once they hear the learner protesting about the heart problem, they're going to stop shocking, but that's not what happened. The actual results, of course, as we said, 65%, a full 2/3 of participants continued the highest level, 450 volts. And remember, the learner is silent. We can assume that he's either dead or unconscious, and they just keep gang, 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 gang all the way. 100% of the participants, every damn one of them, gave at least 300 volts. But there were 14 who were defiant participants, and they stopped. And here, of course, you can see, I won't belabor the point, but at what voltage level these people stopped at. And of course, when the findings were not in conjunction with what he thought, he decided we need to run another variation of this. I can't believe what I'm seeing here. So he run 18 different variations of this. And this is what the takeaways, the factors affecting obedience based on Milgram's findings was institutional authority. You got that institute being Yale University and a guy in a lab coat who's neatly coiffed hair. You know, he has perceived authority over you as a day laborer there in Connecticut. The authoritative uniform, the lab coat. And I throw this up here because, of course, that's actor Ray Fiennes pretending to be a Nazi, but Hugo Boss designed those uniforms and he did a damn good job at them because they just scream authority and someone who is in total control. And also the same can be said for there's the Rwandan army in their culture, in their community. That is a smartly dressed man. And when he's saying pick up a machete and cut the tall trees, you know, now we also have the buffers from the consequences. We're going to talk about that in a moment, Dr. Fuller, but divided responsibilities, gradual nature of the task. I think we saw that with our Reserve Police Battalion, right?
Mm-hmm. You ease people into it.
And limited time for reflection. They were taken out of the woods, maybe weren't told what they were going to be doing, given some booze and some ammunition. And then, of course, finally, they had a contractual obligation to do what they were there to do, in the sense that whether it's you're in the military or for these people that receive $4 to participate and sign their little contract with Yale University, right?
No, absolutely. And if you take this and pull back on it, you look at this list. This is a list of abuse of power in any realm. I mean, go anywhere and find any kind of abuse of power. And these steps, you follow these steps and you get there with people. Yeah. You really, really do. And, you know, I'm not saying you get there with Germans. You get there with Japanese, or you get there with Serbs. No, I'm saying you get there. Full stop.
I'm glad you said the Japanese, man. I've tried to read The Rape of Nanking. I'm on my third reading. And I'm almost done with it. I'm probably 2/3, and it's just so freaking horrific, man. So I'm glad you said Japanese. Serbs is another great one. You know, it's unbelievable that anywhere on the planet you find human beings, you have a ready-made. You have everything you need to have this happen to you.
And if you don't talk about it, if you don't look at it, if you don't study it, then you're not going to be inoculated against it at all, and it makes it just that much easier for you to go down these paths.
Jeff says the Tigers were consisting mostly of Hindus, Marxist, Leninists. Interesting. So let's take a look at his 18 variations and look at some of the things that he changed, and we'll kind of finish it up here, Dr. Fuller, and I'll get your final thoughts. First thing he wanted to do was remove the uniform. So what happened is the man in the lab coat would take you only so far, and then he would get called away. The phone's going to ring. It's like, oh, I'm going to have my assistant step in here. And it was just an average guy dressed in just like a man off the street. And yeah, once the lab coat was removed, this is crazy, but only 20% shocked all the way to death when you took the lab coat away. When you change locations, now they're doing it in a strip mall, not at Yale campus. But still 47.5% shocked them to death. When you had two guys in lab coats going, yeah, proceed. 92.5% obedience. 92.5% of the participants shocked a guy to death. This is an interesting one. I wouldn't have guessed it would have been so high. Touch proximity, meaning that Mr. Wallace isn't in another room. He's some abstract person mouthing through a wall. He's right next to you. Your arms are touching. He's facing away from you, but your arm is touching his. And even when he goes unconscious, 30% of the time he was executed. He was zapped all the way to death by 30% of the people, even though he's laying there slumped over. Isn't that insane?
It's nuts. And again, no indoctrination. These people haven't been, through the crucible at Marine Corps basic training and then told this is your graduation exercise. That's not what's going on here. This is people making a few bucks, $4 to come in and push a button as part of a study.
Teachers, plumbers, literally doctors. An MD shocked a person to death. And I read that in the study. Like, what in the hell?
Ordinary men.
Ordinary men. That's why we named it this. This is an interesting one. And this is why we're having this conversation, Dr. Fuller, because social support conditions, when what they did was, in this part of the experiment, they had 2 actors and 1 role player. I'm sorry, they had 2 actors and then the 1 innocent person off the street. And all 3 of them are supposed to be administering shocks. And the 2 that were actors would be like, I'm not doing this anymore. And the other one's like, yeah, I'm out too. And then the third person who's like, oh, well, then I'll stop too. So once you had 2 people in the group going, I refuse this, I'm not, and they're still, the experiment must continue. And the actors are saying, yeah, not happening, brother. I'm not shocking this guy anymore than that. But what's crazy is 10% of the time, that third person's like, yeah, I don't care. You guys can leave the room. I'm going to keep shocking all the way to death.
And I wonder what the percentages would have been if the protester had been saying, I don't want to do this anymore. And that instead of contradictory authorities, it was supporting authorities. They both were, well, we're doing it. And they kept going,
Yeah.
Because that's what you see in the police battalion.
Mm-hmm.
Is, you might have somebody with a moral objection to executing a mother and her infant child. Go figure. But the 2 guys next to him didn't have that moral objection, and they did it. So what sort of social pressure does that put on the refuser, and what is the net result of that social pressure?
I think there's to your point, I think there's a tipping point where if you have enough people in the unit going, not happening, it's gonna get, and this speaks to the other thing here. The one where it's 0% shocked to death was when you had contradictories, when there would be 2 men in lab coats. And now one of the guys in the lab coat would go, this is inappropriate. We're not doing this. This experiment's gone too far. And the other one's like, no, we must continue. When you had 2 authority figures countermanding each other, 0% shocked to death. That's a huge takeaway.
It is. And it's also why you have such a thing in the military as a unity of command. You can't have people giving you contradictory orders in a situation like this, because you will not get the result that you need. Now, in this case, obviously, the result that you need was, for purposes of the experiment. But you see what happens in the police battalion. There was unity of command. There was no contradictory authority. There was nobody allowed to stick around going, we will not do this. There's no chaplain walking through there going, you must take a moral stand against this. This is wrong. That wasn't happening. The only figures that were speaking were support. We're saying, do this. You got to do this. This is your job. Go forth.
Yeah. No, spot on, man. I love the fact that you keep bringing up that no indoctrination.
Yeah.
They saw an ad in the paper. They called. Sure, I've got Tuesday afternoon off. They rolled in, signed a contract, got $4, and shocked somebody to death.
$4 is $4, Rich.
And here's another thing. Mr. Wallace, if you saw the picture of him, he's this grandfatherly guy. He's supposed to be jovial and jocular when you meet him in the hallway. And I got my grandkids this weekend. I'm excited. I got this heart condition, though. And they're like, yeah, nice to meet you, Mr. Wallace. They strap him into a chair and zap, zap, zap to death.
So there's no animus towards Mr. Wallace. There's no, he's blue or purple or polka dot or Jewish or Islamic or none of that. None of that baggage. Nope. Imagine how much easier it becomes to shock, what your percentages do in terms of who shocks him to death when you start to add that baggage. When you can start othering this guy. Mr. Wallace isn't like me anymore. He's so much easier to do these things to.
That's when you break out the machetes and it gets personal. You know what I mean? And I say that because if you look at the Rwandan genocide, the Hutus and Tutsis, there'd been a lot of friction there over the years. There'd been a little pop of genocide here in the 50s and a little pop there. Some people fleeing into Burundi and some other places. And then you have Hutu hate radio going. And well, it's the government kind of fine with it. They're not trying to stop or censor Hutu hate radio. And then your president gets assassinated. His plane gets shot down after he signs a peace agreement. And you're told by the government that it's these effing cockroaches that did it. We knew we couldn't live beside them. We've been telling you this. Time to cut the tall trees. And you're just like, hell yeah, give me the machete, buddy. I knew these people wouldn't leave us alone.
And it's a result of that indoctrination. And I worry about that here in the United States because we talk about the balkanization of this country. We've talked about it on the show. and the increasing levels that we're seeing over and over and over again. I worry about, we're going from a position of, well, I don't agree with that guy's political position, to that guy's political position is anathema to my existence. It's an existential threat. They're completely wrong. They're inhuman. And now we're othering our fellow Americans. And it becomes much easier to go from arguing to picking up a brick, picking up a machete. And that's not a road we need to be on. We need to get off that road. And a show like this, I think, points out, look, this is what can happen. And it can happen very, very easily. And it has happened repeatedly in human history, over and over and over. And look at the Serbia experience, right? When Yugoslavia broke up, you had people that were living in villages together for generations, suddenly killing each other.
Can we remind people that, because a lot of people don't know this, the Serbs that committed genocide were Christians, and they killed Muslims wholesale, Christians, Orthodox Christians. So again, it's not those of us who are followers of Christ. We're capable of this too, wholesale genocide. And the same thing was with Rwanda. Man, the Catholic Church has a stain on them. A lot of these poor Tutsis ran to the church, and they were allowed to be massacred by or some of their priests even participated in it, the Roman Catholic priests there. So, well, the last one, Dr. Fuller, was absent experiment or condition. So what that means is the man in the lab coat goes, I've got to run out. I'm going to just call it in. Okay. Are you fine here? You good to go? You got some water? You understand what you're doing? Okay. When the phone rings, just pick it up and I'll kind of walk you through it. So there's nobody in the room. Okay. But there's a guy on the other end of the line who says, you must continue. And still 20.5% knocked him to death just by talking to a man who's supposedly has an authority figure on the telephone telling you to do it.
And this is why you end up with NKVD units running around behind Russian Soviet units in World War II. They're not phoning in an order. They're right there behind you. And it's a motivator. And it gets people to do what they're ordered to do on a higher percentage basis than just some remote guy making a phone call. I mean, look at your own experience in the military. How many times did you get orders to do stuff, regardless of what it was? And, it could be something completely trivial. And if it came over the radio, the battalion commander was on the other side of the installation. It came through 3 levels of command. It all was on the radio. You're like, how much more often did you just go, we're not doing that. We're not. That's ridiculous. We're not going to do it. Versus battalion commander standing there right behind you going, Sergeant, do this.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
there was after because the fire support cell I was a part of course, I was in the battalion commander's track, and after we did what we did in conjunction with the I can't remember the air wing that was running the sorties against the highway of death, or Highway 80. Hell, there was a former U.S. Attorney General that said what we had done was a war crime because they were fleeing non-combatants. And, at the time, so I fall into that, like, well, did I commit a war crime? I don't think so, but
I had never heard they were non-combatants. I'd heard they were retreating. And of course they were taking all their ill-gotten gains with them, right?
And that's why
cars and everything else.
They were fleeing combatants, in my opinion. Right. You know what I mean?
Right.
They deserved every round they got.
Right. And that has been a surefire way to get decimated in the military time immemorial. You stand and fight, you're going to take casualties. You turn and flee, you're going to get run to ground.
Amen.
And that's what they did. And
a couple comments here. I know we're bumping up against the time, Dr. Fuller, that you need to be off. But Tony says the indoctrination starts in our schools. Will Parker says, but the left is so tolerant of those who think like them. Mark says the French Revolution and the people putting aristocrats in the guillotine. Yeah. Michael Gentile says the Catholic Church serving up genocide since the 11th century. So really that concludes the show, man. I hope that everybody understands. I want to say it one more time. This is a human problem. No one is escaping this.
Yeah. And, as we hear all the time, those who don't study history are doomed to repeat it. This is a classic example of training on a topic that you need to get, folks, so that you can avoid going down these paths, because our society is getting more and more fragmented, more and more polarized, and opportunities for ordinary men to go down bad paths are increasing. That's not who we are as a nation. It's not who we are as Americans. It's not who we are as Americans Warrior Society members. That's not what we do. But that fight is coming. Be ready.